What if I told you that Europe is making decisions right now that will reshape the future of an entire religion on their continent? Decisions so bold, so unprecedented, that even 5 years ago they would have been called impossible. We're not talking about small policy changes, we're talking about mass deportations, citizenship revocations, and entire communities being told, your time here is over. This isn't a prediction, this is happening right now. And what's more shocking, the people are cheering for it. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about Europe's future. Let's start with the numbers that nobody wants to talk about. Sweden, the country that once proudly called itself the humanitarian superpower of the world, just did something unthinkable. In 2024, they granted only 6,250 asylum permits. That's a staggering 90% drop from their peak, but it gets even more extreme. Denmark, once known for its tolerance and openness, approved just 864 asylum applications last year. That's the lowest number in 4 decades. But here's the kicker. Their government's official goal is to reduce that number to 0. Yes, you heard that right. 0. France is moving to strip dual citizens of their nationality if they're convicted of terror offenses. Germany is not just deporting migrants, they're paying them to leave and banning Islamic organizations they label as radical. Even Ireland, a country that stayed neutral through world wars, cracked down hard after riots erupted in Dublin. So the question we need to ask is, what changed? Why is Europe, after decades of preaching multiculturalism and open borders, suddenly slamming on the brakes? For decades, Europe sold itself a beautiful story. Immigration would strengthen society. Different cultures would blend harmoniously. Integration would happen naturally, like water finding its level. Islamic communities transplanted into secular liberal democracies would simply adapt over time. It was a hopeful narrative. It was also a complete fantasy. What Europe actually got was something very different. Parallel societies began forming, entire neighborhoods where the authority of the state barely registered, where criminal networks operated openly, rooted deep in immigrant communities, where police officers, teachers, and emergency responders would quietly admit certain areas just don't function like the rest of our country. This wasn't diversity creating strength. This was fragmentation creating chaos. Let me paint you a picture. Molenbeek, a suburb in Brussels. After the Paris terror attacks, the world discovered this neighborhood had become a breeding ground for jihadists. But here's what's truly disturbing. The authorities already knew. They had known for years. Political correctness kept them silent. In London, Tower Hamlets saw the rise of Sharia councils arbitrating family disputes, operating in direct conflict with British law. In the Paris suburbs, riots became so routine that they barely made international headlines anymore. In Malmö, Sweden, gang shootings became part of daily life. These weren't isolated incidents scattered across a massive continent. These were symptoms of a system failing in real time. But statistics and neighborhoods are abstract. Let me make this personal. Let me tell you about real people whose lives were destroyed. Samuel Paty, a teacher in France. In 2020, he was beheaded outside his school. His crime, showing a cartoon of Muhammad while teaching about freedom of expression. 3 years later, another teacher, Dominique Bernard, was stabbed to death in Arras by a radicalized youth. Churches across Europe vandalized and burned. Jewish families fleeing neighborhoods they'd lived in for generations because of constant harassment from extremist youths. Synagogues requiring armed guards just to open their doors. Kosher shops closing down permanently. After Hamas attacked Israel in October 2023, European cities exploded with anti-Semitic incidents. Jewish schools in France and Belgium temporarily shut down due to credible threats. Pro-Palestinian rallies, where some participants openly chanted eliminationist slogans calling for violence. Germany's own chancellor, in a country still haunted by its dark history, had to stand up and declare it intolerable that Jews once again felt unsafe on German soil. Yet it was happening, and everyone knew why. The crime statistics tell a story that politicians desperately wanted to ignore. In Denmark, immigrants made up just 8% of the population, but accounted for nearly 30% of violent crime convictions. In Sweden, areas with high immigrant concentrations reported crime rates 5 to 10 times the national average. Women became afraid to walk alone at night in cities their grandmothers considered safe. Pensioners watched their neighborhoods transform beyond recognition. Working-class families were squeezed out of public housing to make room for asylum seekers who had just arrived. So, if the situation was this bad, why did it take so long for Europe to act? The answer will make you angry. For years, both centre-left and centre-right establishment parties were broadly pro-immigration, and the reason was simple: politics and profit. Once immigrants naturalised, they voted, often for the parties that welcomed them. Critics accused Tony Blair's government in Britain of quietly loosening immigration controls to rub the right's nose in diversity and create a more cosmopolitan, Labour-friendly electorate. Meanwhile, wealthy business interests loved high immigration. It provided cheap labour that kept wages suppressed. They formed what critics called a coalition of the comfortable: urban professionals, big business, ethnic minority lobbies, all benefiting from open borders while ordinary citizens paid the price. And here's the most infuriating part: these elites lived in safe, upscale neighborhoods. Their children attended private schools. If things got bad, they had the means to leave. The average working-class family didn't have that luxury. They were stuck, forced to watch their communities change while being called bigots for simply noticing. But there's something even more dangerous lurking beneath all of this. A time bomb that most people don't even know exists, and it's about to detonate. While Europe was importing millions of low-skilled workers to fill labor gaps, technology was quietly preparing to eliminate those exact jobs. By the 2030s, just a few years from now, automation and artificial intelligence are projected to eliminate 20 to 30% of current jobs in developed economies. And which jobs are most at risk? The ones immigrants fill. Factory assembly lines taken over by robots, delivery and trucking replaced by self-driving vehicles, warehouse work automated by algorithms, retail replaced by kiosks and self-checkout. Even manual labor in construction and agriculture being done by machines. Europe thought it was solving an aging population problem. Instead, it created a catastrophic future crisis. Picture this scenario. It's 2035. A Somali delivery driver in Berlin watches an autonomous van pull up to replace him. His brother's warehouse job, automated; his cousin's taxi, self-driving; his neighbor's construction work, done by robots and 3D printers. The jobs they came for have vanished, but the neighborhoods they live in remain, and the frustration grows into something dangerous. By 2035, a single European country could have 1 million immigrant background residents concentrated in cities, many of whom came for low-wage work that no longer exists. If even half become economically redundant, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of unemployed, marginalized young men with no prospects and no future. The potential for unrest doesn't just increase, it becomes inevitable. So Europe finally woke up, and when it did, the changes were breathtaking. Sweden, the humanitarian superpower, is now offering immigrants up to $34,000 to voluntarily leave and return to their home countries. That's life-changing money in most developing nations. The message is crystal clear: take the cash and go home. But it doesn't stop there. They're proposing a snitch law requiring teachers, doctors, and social workers to report undocumented migrants for deportation. Asylum seekers who refuse to live in assigned centers lose all state benefits. Language and civics tests are now mandatory for citizenship. The results? Asylum applications collapsed to under 10,000 in 2024, a 94% drop. For the first time since the 1970s, Sweden experienced negative net migration, more people leaving than coming. Denmark went even further. They passed a law enabling the transfer of asylum seekers to a third country outside Europe, likely Rwanda, for processing. The idea? Anyone showing up in Denmark gets shipped to a distant camp. If their claim is approved, they get protection there, not in Denmark. Denmark also started revoking refugee status aggressively. Syrian refugees who'd lived there for years, learned Danish, found jobs, suddenly received notices. Your protection is not being renewed, return to Syria or await deportation. And then there's the ghetto package. Mandatory daycare for toddlers as young as 1 year old in immigrant-dense neighborhoods. 25 hours per week of government-run childcare teaching Danish language and values, including lessons on Christmas, Easter, and democracy. If parents refuse, they lose welfare benefits. The state is literally forcing assimilation from the cradle. So what does all this mean? Europe is at a crossroads. After flirting with a post-national multicultural future, it's rediscovered something fundamental. National identity and cultural continuity matter, not out of hatred, but from a sober assessment of what holds a society together. The liberal values that Europe gave the world, democracy, freedom of expression, individual rights, gender equality, these require something to survive. They require stable, cohesive societies with shared trust. When people feel unsafe or deeply fragmented, lofty principles become impossible to uphold. Europe is realizing its civilization is fragile, and it's choosing to protect it. The pendulum is swinging back. After an era of unprecedented openness, European nations are reasserting their right to say no more uncontrolled inflows, no more parallel societies, no more sacrificing local security for abstract moral duty. The question now is, will these policies work? Can reversing immigration and enforcing integration restore social harmony? Or are the scars too deep to heal? One thing is certain: Europe has made its choice, and it's declaring to the world, we will not apologize for surviving. What do you think? Is Europe justified in these dramatic reversals, or is it abandoning the values that made it great? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to understand the forces reshaping our world,